Welcome to the McFeely Mess podcast at Inforum.com. In-depth conversations and opinion covering a variety of topics from the world of news, sports, and more. Here's Mike McFeely.
All right, welcome to the relaunch of the McFeely Mess podcast here at Inforum.com. And you all out there in Inforum land requested that I start this podcast again after taking about a year off because I just got just tired of doing it and didn't quite know what I wanted it to be, and it was kind of a mess. But you all reached out to me when I reached out to you and told me, nope, start it up again. We don't mind that it's sort of all over the place. We don't mind that you talk about fishing one day and Bison football the next and then politics the next. And by the way, by God, please talk about politics because everything in North Dakota and western Minnesota is all right-wing crap. So please talk about politics more in your program so we have something besides the you-know-who's and of the world and all of that. We're here in Vic's Bar and Grill, by the way. And my first guest on the podcast, say hopefully he can be in a regular rotation along with others that you requested like Clay Jenkinson and Tony Bender and folks like that, is Joel Heitkamp. And you all know Joel. He is the host of News and Views on KFGO and your News and Views radio network, which is also what other stations, Joel?
Oh, we're on in Grafton and Langdon, and we're on in Williston, and we're on, well, of course we can say a whole lot of other towns because of the way we reach the lineup there, but those are the radio stations.
Yeah, so thanks for joining me today. You're our first relaunch guest. We're in the beautiful Vic's Bar and Grill.
I like this place.
This is pretty sweet.
This just smells of Joel. Feels
that's
like
what that is. I thought it was the French fries, but that's what it is. Joel. Okay.
By the way, I want to compliment you in the beginning because you always were better at this than me. You said you all, and I would have said y'all. So we're doing great.
I think it's. I don't. Obviously, we're not Southerners, but I think all y'all means like everybody.
Okay.
From what all y'all. So if you say all y'all, that means, and if you say y'all, that means one person.
Okay.
So I probably, technically by Southern lexicon, said it incorrectly. But since we're on, although it's a podcast, so anybody can listen to it, but we're on in North Dakota and Minnesota, nobody knows the difference anyway because we just don't say that around here.
You always could spell and I can't too. So there you go.
Perfect. So here's what I want to talk to you about today. You and I don't know that we've had a chance. I was on your radio show 3 months ago, and we talked about it some then. Doug Burgum, the governor of North Dakota, running for president, trying to get the Republican nomination. Didn't work out for him. He announced in June. I was pretty excited about it just as a local newsman. I thought, this is pretty cool. It became apparent quickly it wasn't really going to go anywhere. I think that was obvious to most of us who kind of know the way this works. He dropped out in early December after many of us. I think I led the pack, though. I was kind of proud of that, telling him, just get out. It's not gonna work for you, Doug. But he's done. We don't know at this point what's going to happen to Doug Burgum or whether he's going to run for governor, although we can talk about that later on. But I just wanted to get, Joel, your thoughts in retrospect, now that we've had a month or so to think about this. Just talk a little bit about Doug Burgum's campaign, how it was run, what he tried to be or tried to not be, whether it's going to lead to something else, whether it might be a launch for another campaign in the future, all those things. Let's cover a lot of that. I just want to open the mic to you and say, in general, as you look back on it now, your thoughts on Doug Burgum's campaign.
Well, I think Doug, first off, there were some indicators. When you have to pay people more money than what they bring in as a donation just to be able to be in the primary, that's a terrible sign. That means you're not connecting, even down in Iowa, where he should be able to talk the same language as everyone because we raise corn, they raise corn. But when you've got to pay 20 people or people $20, so, they'll give you $1 and you qualify for a debate.
And it counts as a donation under the campaign rules.
That's a really bad sign. I think the rules stink, but I also think that was an indicator to Doug that he should have took your advice earlier and got out. Now, money isn't much.
So like a day after he launched, you should have just gotten out.
Money isn't much to Doug. We wouldn't be arguing about who's picking up the tab here at Vic's if it was up to Doug, right? But here's the thing about Doug's race to me. I think that he never realized who he was running against. Doug was running in his mind against Joe Biden, and he's wrong about that. He was running against Nikki Haley, and he was running against Donald Trump, is who he's running against. And actually, that's the failing of the people still running against Donald Trump. Chris Christie's the only one I know that's running against Donald Trump. And Doug was terrible at it, to the point where, I never thought that he was actually running to be Secretary of Ag or Vice President or Secretary. Pick anything you want. I never thought that he was running for one of those jobs until I realized that he would never even try to throw a haymaker or a punch at Donald Trump. Then I started questioning whether or not, hey, maybe he is in this race to do one of two things, to get a job in the Trump administration, or because 4 years from now, he'll think he has a better chance. I don't know. I know this. It was a terrible campaign. He was bad at it. He stood on a stage at one point, and the question of energy came up, and he couldn't muscle himself into the debate at that time. I mean, I'm sorry, but if it goes right in your wheelhouse where they're talking ag and energy, that's your time to butt in, be rude, be whatever. And the North Dakota nice thing, if that was his goal, it didn't work, Mike.
Did he not know that he was running against Donald Trump, or did he know it and was he just too afraid to confront Donald Trump? Because that's what he kept attacking, and you're right. The whole campaign was Joe Biden this, Joe Biden that, Joe Biden economics. The cards that he was handing out to people for $20, they would give him $1, were what, Joe Biden economic relief cards. I mean, he was clearly, it was Biden, but he knew. I mean, he's not stupid. I mean, so he knew he was running against Trump. So was he just afraid to confront Trump, like they all are, by the way, except for Chris Christie, and God bless Chris Christie. Don't like his politics, but I at least respect the man now for trying to save democracy in the United States. I mean, so what? I mean, why? I don't know. You know Doug better than I do. Was he just afraid? Is he afraid to alienate the base? Was he afraid that he'd piss off voters in North Dakota? So that if he did have to fall back on running for governor again in North Dakota, because Doug likes to be one of one, that he would anger them enough that a Rick Becker or somebody would primary him? What's your thoughts on that?
I think Doug's the guy that you don't give your car keys to in a South Dakota bar. I think that when the fighting starts, he'd be running out to Main Street, hopping in the car and gone, and you'd be the one left doing the fighting. In Doug Burgum's case, his biggest failing was whoever his consultant was, or I guess that's too easy for him to get out of, because you can always tell a consultant no. But Doug Burgum wasn't ready for prime time. Mm-hmm. He wasn't. When he sat in we've all interviewed him. I read you wrote a great article saying this is what the Republican Party is. This is the MAGA Republican Party. So get used to it, Doug. If you're going to run in it, you better understand it. You better know who they are, right? And I don't think that Doug is the type of Republican that is like a North Dakota state representative, homophobic, racist, all the things that go with it.
I don't believe that either.
Yeah,
I think that people need to know that from us, that
right.
we oppose Doug Burgum's politics for the most part.
Yep.
I don't believe that in his heart that he's this idiot from Williston who was ranting to the cops. I don't believe that that's Doug Burgum.
No, I think he's a good and decent person, but he doesn't know how to get in a fight. And politics is a game that's bare knuckles, and the Republican Party is just exactly that right now. And if you look at how Donald Trump, who is the Republican Party now, runs that party, you'd have to argue that he never saw anyone that he didn't want to get in a fight with, right?
Yep.
And so Doug needed to do that. He needed a separation, if for no other reason than to make a name with these MAGAs another day, if that was his goal. I wonder, Mike, and I wonder whether or not he got into it and some point said, I don't like it. I don't like these people. I don't like what this is. Or if it was just, holy cow, I'm not getting enough attention.
Well, what did he think it was going to be? If that's the case, I don't know. You might be exactly right, Joel. But I mean, what did he think it was going to be? I'm not even in politics. I've never been in politics, and I know that this is a bloody street brawl, even within the parties, both Democratic and Republican. I mean,
but go backwards in Doug's political life, right? He didn't run at the Republican convention. He says he did, but he didn't. He
Correct.
announced before the convention that he was going directly to the primary. Well, what did that do for him? It injected the millions of dollars that he had to do to get that spot on the ballot in the fall. He knew once he won in the Republican primary that he was governor, so that's where he put his money in against Wayne Stingham. What price did he pay? North Dakota Republicans don't like him, at least that inner circle. I'm not talking about as a whole. I'm talking about legislators. I'm talking about party officials. They don't like Doug Burgum.
And that counts, by the way, the North Dakota Republican Party, that has the executive director. Those people, even before it's the North Dakota Republican Party machinery that is today, because it's different people, right? I mean, from 3 years ago,
it's gotten more conservative.
It's gotten way more Trumpy and wacko. It used to be, I think. Well, again, where you and I don't necessarily like the politics or even like some of those people who were running the party 3 or 4 years ago, I think they're at least semi-decent humans in most cases, and that's all different today. So it's even worse, is my point, that the North Dakota machinery is even farther to the right now than it was a few years ago.
Yeah, and then so whoever is advising him at that time when he gets in, he cannot fulfill any pledge or anything he wanted to do, so he conformed to them.
Yeah.
And he became who they are, which is an expansion of government. No one's going to say Doug Burgum turned government into running like a business, right?
Correct.
He took, what did he use? About $1 million to get rid of a legislator at one time, and he lost, albeit because of the system, but he lost. So he couldn't buy the legislature he wants. And so now you're running for president, and you're, I don't know Doug's worth, but I would guess that you're probably the only, other than Donald Trump, billionaire in the race. And so there's an assumption.
That would make Doug Burgum the only billionaire in the race, but go on.
Yeah, right. Donald tends to lie about those things. But I've got a friend that I knew in the legislature from Maine. He's still a good friend. I mean, we keep in touch. And Maine's advertising from New Hampshire, or the New Hampshire advertising, spills over to Maine.
Sure, yep.
And he called me one day, and he said, "How much money does your governor have?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Every 2 seconds when I turn on my TV, there's an ad for Doug Burgum, ad for Doug Burgum, ad for Doug Burgum." And I said, "Well, he's got a lot." And he goes, "Well, he's clearly trying to buy New Hampshire." You saw the poll numbers in New Hampshire. I mean, it wasn't working.
He peaked at, 8%, something like that, and then it dropped after that.
And that was one poll that everybody kind of questioned.
Yes,
right?
correct. What disappointed me, and I'll be honest, like I said, I when we found out that Burgum was going to run and make the announcement in downtown Fargo, and I thought, okay, I had an open mind. I am what I am politically, but it was a local guy running for president. It was going to be 1 million columns for me. It was 1 million radio programs for you.
Yep.
It meant probably better ratings for you. I thought it meant a ton of readership for me. I thought this is what people are going to be talking about. I thought people are going to be excited. Hey, a North Dakota guy who is a decent enough human. He's not some wackadoodle. And I was excited when things started. Beginning at his actual announcement, I kind of went, what?
There's no there.
Who are you?
Yeah.
Who are you? What's the message here?
Right.
And it became apparent to me quickly, and I think everybody else looking at our readership numbers and his poll numbers, I just think people thought, what, as you said, there's no there. What?
Right.
Who is he trying to be, or who is he, and what's his message, and what's his lane? What was his lane trying to be? That's what I kept bringing up with people is, okay, so Trump has got the Trump lane. Ramaswamy is trying to be more Trumpy and the younger, wackier version of Trump. DeSantis is trying to be the reasonable Trump. Haley's trying to get away from him a little bit, but not too far. Christie's the anti-Trump. Pence is a wet rag that should have never run. Right. I mean, but I always wondered, what was Burgum trying to say? What was his message? What was he trying to be? He was a cowboy in some of his ads. He was a small-town chimney sweep grain elevator guy in other ads. He was a genius businessman in other ads. He was a governor in other. I mean, what what the hell was he trying to be? I don't think he ever defined, this is who I am, this is why I want to be president. That's the old question.
Where are you going to drive the car if we give you the keys?
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yep.
And nobody, I don't think he knew the answer to that question. He just knew he wanted the job. I mean, he knew he wanted the job, and he knew he wanted to be that head on the classroom wall that's above the. We'd call it blackboard, but the whatever.
Yeah,
you
it's
call
also
it.
whiteboard or something.
Yeah,
but
now,
yes,
yeah. So or computer screen.
Yes,
but in his case, I don't know that he could answer the question you just asked. And the reason that I think he struggled and all the other candidates you just named struggled, and the reason that the reason for all of that is the same reason that Joe Biden and the Democrats are struggling, which is this: that love it or hate it, and many of the people that are listening to this may love it. Donald Trump is a movement. He is a movement. When we had civil rights, that was a movement. When we had women's rights, that was a movement. There was passion. People were going to the streets. People were holding up signs. People were giving up that day's work. People were giving up other days' work. People were painting their cars, ERA now. Well, in Donald Trump's case, that's a movement. I don't like it. I don't like the movement. I'm never going to vote for it. But the truth of the matter is Donald Trump is able to bring out that much passion in people, and because of it, they fear him. They fear him. They fear him. They look at him.
They mean other Republican candidates.
Other Republicans, big time fear him. The Democrats, I think, to some degree, while they don't fear him, don't know how to run against him yet.
Yep.
I think that's fair. But I think that Doug Burgum, in order to beat him, was going to have a movement like Chris Christie is. Chris Christie's trying that. It's just the problem is the party's left him.
Republicans don't want to hear it. They don't want Chris Christie. But you're right. I mean, it's obvious with Chris Christie that he woke up one day and said, my lot in life for the next year or year and a half or whatever it is I'm going to trash Donald Trump, and I'm going to try to, if not defeat him, drive down his numbers enough so that somebody else can defeat him.
Yep.
And, Vivek Ramaswamy woke up one day and said, this is what I'm going to be, and all the things. I think Doug Burgum, you're right. I don't think ever he wanted to be president, but he never said, this is my one thing. I mean, if I ever in my life, which I never will, run for city council in the city of Moorhead, Minnesota, I am going to wake up one day and say, I'm going to have one or two things that I'm going to focus on. And that's right. Win or lose the election, that's what I'm going to find my strengths and say, I want a new basketball court built at 18th Street South in Moorhead. Yeah. That's going to be my thing, and that's going to get me elected. Doug Burgum never, he was energy without ever wanting to say the word oil, because oil is offensive to some. He would always say drop of energy, which was the weirdest goddamn thing I've ever heard anybody say. Drop of energy instead of drop of oil, but that's, be as it may. Yeah.
I never knew what he meant by that.
He was all these things that just never connect. There was no chance they were ever going to connect. That's what was so odd. Well, there was no chance that the drop of energy thing was ever going to connect with anybody. Everybody's going, what the hell's he talking about?
It works when you do what you just described, though. I won, albeit North Dakota legislature. You got to get about 6,000 votes. Mm-hmm. But I won in a Republican district because I talked about property taxes and infrastructure. That's two things. Yeah. I woke up in the morning, I talked about reducing your property taxes, and I talked about building roads and bridges. Boom. People said, oh, cripes, he doesn't sound like a liberal Democrat. I mean, he's our guy.
Because that mattered in their life.
Exactly.
Right? Everybody or most people pay property taxes.
What did Doug Burgum
and
say?
Nobody wants crappy roads and bridges.
Right. What did he say that mattered in their life that separated him?
Correct.
That separated him. It would have been so easy, Mike, and I think Chris Christie is wrong here. I think that Chris Christie is, and what you said about him is right. He knows he's not going to be the Republican nominee. He thinks he's doing this to save democracy. He knows what a threat Donald Trump is to democracy. But in Doug Burgum's case, I would have had one of Kent Conrad's charts, and I would have said, here's what he said he was going to do, Donald Trump. He didn't do any of it. He didn't. He didn't secure our border. He didn't build you the wall. Mexico didn't pay for it. He didn't reduce the spending in government. He didn't help Social Security. He put tariffs on for you farmers out there. You're running in Iowa. I mean, you're running in Iowa.
Yeah.
He put tariffs on that caused the price of corn and soybeans to go down, and the answer to him for all that was to subsidize and throw money at farmers when he blew their markets up.
Yep.
And so there were things there that Doug Burgum, if I'd have been in a room with, I'd have said, Doug, try this, try that. I just think that he never wanted it. He or at least was too afraid to go get it.
I think he's afraid of. I mean, he's still going to support Trump.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they all will, but it never made sense that if you're running, if I'm running against you for Moorhead City Council,
right.
With all due respect, I'm going to criticize you.
Yeah. First thing you're going to say, I mean, if I moved into Moorhead, a year ago,
what a carpet
he's
bagger.
Lauren Boebert.
This guy just moved here. Yeah, this guy moved here last week to run against me. He's lived in North Dakota. Go back to North Dakota, right?
I
mean, that's easy.
Right? Yeah. You've got to pick a fight.
Right.
And people are going to say, well, use the word debate, Joel. No. It's bare knuckles. You're running for president of the United States of America. You look at the race that one of our greatest presidents ever ran, which is Abraham Lincoln, and you look at what he said during that race and what he backed, you're going, holy cow, this isn't the guy I knew, right?
Yep.
I mean, the last docile campaign we ever had for president was Dwight Eisenhower.
Right.
And that's because I think he woke up in the morning and didn't know if he wanted the job. But in Doug Burgum's case, I think it showed the very reason why he hasn't been an effective governor. Because it's about, everybody thinks it's about this and that and that. You got to be able to govern. And in Doug Burgum's case, he's sitting on $11 billion, and yet my property taxes, I just paid them, are
they're not going down.
Right. And so, there's ways that you can use the positions you have, and he hasn't done it. He just hasn't done it.
So you, like me, never, at least early on, you said, never believed that Doug wanted to be Interior Secretary or Energy Secretary. I never thought that either. And I don't know Doug Burgum well, but I do know that I've talked to enough people who do know him fairly well. And what they've told me is Doug doesn't want to be one of 100 in the U.S. Senate. He doesn't want to be one of 435 in the U.S. House. He doesn't want to be one in a cabinet meeting with the other guy at the front of the table. Yeah. He wants to be the guy at the front of the table and nobody else. He wants to be one of one.
I was sitting here being ready to answer what you said, trying to remember how many cabinet positions there are so I could use the number. But yeah, he couldn't take orders. I still believe that he couldn't be told what to do. I know a number of people that worked at Great Plains, then Microsoft, and he'd have leadership meetings and they'd sit around the room and they'd give him ideas and then they'd he'd look at you and say thank you and then do what he wanted anyway.
Yeah. Yep.
And so that's what powerful, rich people do. I think that kind of defines Doug Burgum. He had that interview on, I think it was 60 Minutes, but they interviewed him and they asked him whether or not, it was on NBC, and they asked him whether or not he would ever do business with Doug Burgum,
NBC.
with Donald Trump. Long pause, pregnant pause. Oh my God! I didn't think they'd ask me this. The look of terror in his eyes,
because you could never think that question was coming. By the way, right? You'd never think that somebody would ask about Donald Trump. So you could see the wheels cranking in Doug's
And you
head.
and I worked around enough TV people to know that they don't let blank air out there. They usually cut that right directly to the answer. They didn't.
No.
Chuck Todd, they didn't, and so they let him just sit and spin on it, and then finally he goes no. And I always thought that as much as they fear Donald Trump, stuff like that gets back to him. When you say no to a question of whether or not you'd ever do business with him, it's going to haunt you. If this is the man you fear and the MAGAs are the people that you wake up in the morning and go, I need them if I'm ever going to run for governor again, that wasn't the right answer.
No. Trump never responded, though, which I don't think, did he?
Yeah, he said no.
He said no to what?
He said he wouldn't do business with him.
Trump never responded.
Oh, okay.
Trump never got back to Burgum, right?
Because Burgum was irrelevant.
Right, just irrelevant. Yep.
I mean, Trump only responded about candidates that
mattered.
Right, and Burgum wasn't relevant in the race,
right.
And so why would I pick a fight with somebody I don't got to worry about?
Yep. So that leads to the obvious next question here, and that is what is next? I've written about it. I've talked with enough people, possibly including somebody at this table right now, about what we thought Doug might do next. And I thought that when Kelly Armstrong on your program came out and said, I think it was on your program, came out and said, I'm running for the U.S. House in 2024, that to me was a signal that he knows or strongly suspects that Doug Burgum is going to run for governor again, because Kelly Armstrong does not want to be in Washington, D.C. He doesn't want to be a member of Congress. No. He hates it from everything I understand, would rather be back in North Dakota. He wants to be governor of North Dakota. Kelly Armstrong does. So with him announcing, quote unquote, for the House, that tells me that Doug Burgum is going to run for governor again in 2024. Do you suspect that as well, or what are your thoughts?
Well, first off, you're spot on right about Kelly Armstrong. I think that he doesn't like being one of 435, but then keep in mind he had to sit right next to Marjorie Taylor Greene for a whole state, which should be hazard.
But I don't know. And again, you know Kelly better than I do. Yeah. I don't know that if it's that he needs to be one of one like Burgum does. I mean, if you're
Congress doesn't do anything.
No, they just. I mean,
right. It's ineffective.
He's just miserable.
Right.
I mean, you're in Washington D.C.
How'd you like to go to those?
Your sister was in D.C. Did she love it there? Did she?
Yeah, well, she ran again.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, but and at times I really believe Heidi misses.
Okay.
It.
All right.
But in Kelly's case, he's an attorney. And he was a practicing attorney who, at the end of the day, could see some completion.
Yes.
In this particular case, they don't get anything done, so he wants out. I don't blame him. I also think that Kelly, the minute Doug Burgum said, I'm not running, Kelly Armstrong would say within 10 minutes he is running.
Okay. So the I'm running for House is for now.
Insurance policy. Well,
okay.
It's tough to raise money unless you say you're running for it.
Yeah, see, I never think about those things.
In Doug Burgum's case, I think that there was a reason for him running for president. I don't think that he ever planned on being president. I think his ego has him in a position where he thinks that the money I just spent was an investment in the future. And if I don't run for governor again, I'm out of the public spotlight and I don't have that platform I need to get the nation's attention. And so I think it's absolutely positive that Doug Burgum's running for governor again.
See, and you don't believe that he thought he could win this race?
No.
See?
No.
Because I'm way wrong, I'm sure, but I actually think that his ego is large enough and he is narcissistic enough that he actually thought he could.
Well, you and about 80.
I do believe that.
You and about 80% of the legislature, which are from his party. So trust me, there's a lot more people who agree with you than me. I think that what he was doing was branding, and it never ever worked. And it wasn't because of a broken Achilles. It wasn't
right.
for
it. Actually helped him, by the way.
Right, got some attention,
the most publicity.
Nationally. But the branding was they got to know who I am. They got to know who I am. I need to be on this show and that show and this show and a powerful medium nationally obviously is TV. And if you're not on Meet the Press, you're not relevant. If you're not on the Stephanopoulos show or Face the Nation, you're not relevant. And so he got some face time with that, but again, there was no movement after that. Nobody, and I'm not talking about supporters going to you from another one. I'm talking about the energy it takes to make people leave a day's work and rush to see you. You and I have been in a room in Bismarck and in other places where 15,000 people were there to see Donald Trump and just be close to him. Joe Biden, he held a meeting tomorrow in North Dakota. Well, let's use Minnesota. He would choose a smaller venue.
Yes. Yep. There's no doubt.
Right.
There's no doubt. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know that if Burgum wants to stay relevant and wants to use the governorship for that and think about 2028, is that? I mean, is he? He's not going to be more relevant in 2028 than he was in 2024.
Well, yeah, but
right?
the reason that you said what you said in the beginning was because of his ego, right?
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
So,
okay.
I mean, if he ran for president thinking he was going to win, then what wouldn't make him think he's going to win when Donald Trump's out of the race?
Fair enough. Okay.
But I think that Doug Burgum gets up in the morning, shaves, and sees a president.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I agree with that. Yeah. Which is, boy, what do you see when you look in the mirror?
I see a guy lucky to have a job.
I look in the mirror and go, who the hell's the old man in my bathroom? Oh, God, that's me.
I see a guy that shaved off his gray goatee, and the first time he stopped a man or BMW to have a beer, they said, boy, you look younger. And my wife says, told ya. So, yeah, and I'm quite a bit older than you. So, for me, you look at what the future of politics is in this nation. If it's going to be defined by Donald Trump, we're in trouble.
Oh, yeah.
And you look at what the Republicans are betting on is, to me, that the fact that he's almost 80 years old. I think many of them believe he'll lose this race, as do I. I think Donald Trump will get beat, and he'll get beat more significantly than last time because the Democrats and Joe Biden haven't even come out and run against him
Correct.
yet. They haven't went out and told the story yet, wisely, because I do believe that Joe Biden would rather run against Donald Trump than Nikki Haley.
Oh, no, 100%.
Right. Which is
Nikki
a major
Nikki
risk.
Haley would win.
And that's a risk for the nation.
Yes.
That Joe Biden's rolling some dice here. All in the name of I could win this way. He takes away the age issue. He takes away the boy, I'm not saying issue, and all of that. But if you look at the nation and when we start to heal, we've had bad leadership before. We had. I mean, this nation went about impeaching a president that broke the law to a man so decent and so ordinary in Jimmy Carter that he did what this nation needed for 4 years.
Yep.
And then this nation after that thought, we're boring. Right? And so this nation did what nations do. They went exciting. Then we went boring. Then we went exciting. Then we went boring. Then we went exciting. And so I think that Donald Trump is going to be remembered in history in such terrible, terrible terms. But I think after this race and after he gets to a point where he knows he's not in politics anymore for himself, you're not going to see him at fundraisers. You're not going to see him anywhere political because he's never going to run for president again if he loses this race.
And we're getting off the subject of Doug Burgum here, but that's fine. He's not that exciting. He might not be worth 45 minutes of podcasting. I don't know. And I have nothing against Doug Burgum. I'm fine. Have you talked to him, by the way, since his campaign ended?
Not since it's over. I asked him on air whether or not he was going to run for president. And that long pause that
Run
they
for
had
governor.
for president.
Okay.
He was in, and this was before he announced, but word had gotten out, and you wrote about it too. But he was sitting there, and I said, "You going to run for president?" And it was just like this. I said, "Doug, you going to run for president?" He goes, and the pause was long.
Jeez.
And finally I said, "Well, I think I got my answer." And he just shook his head and smiled. Doug doesn't understand politics because he never spent any time in it. He was never a page at a convention.
He bought his way in.
Right. I mean, do you ever think Doug Burgum knocked on a door and asked for a vote?
Unlikely.
Right.
Unlikely.
That's politics.
Yep.
I've had little dogs bite me in the heel saying, "Hey, I'd like your vote,"
Yeah. Yeah, what I was going to ask you before I got sidetracked by taking a cheap shot at Burgum was, why are Donald Trump supporters so angry? Why does a person who lives in Fingal, North Dakota, who has a decent job at the elevator, gets to hunt pheasants, shoot ducks, go fishing whenever they want, has no worries about crime, has neighbors they know and trust. They can leave their doors unlocked at night. They can leave their pickup in the driveway unlocked at night. They have a wife and 3 kids who go to a school with very little chance of it being shot up by somebody. They have, 295 million Americans wish for every day. I was just in New York City for 5 days. there's a lot of people in New York City who would love to have that life in Fingal, North Dakota. To be able to wake up, look out the window, and see nothing but sunshine and green fields, and know that your life is good. Why is that person so goddamn angry that they'll support Donald Trump? What do they have to be angry about?
I think that the thing that Donald Trump, I think where the national media gets Donald Trump wrong, is that they believe that Donald Trump created the person that you just described. And I think those individuals created Donald Trump because he recognized they were there. He saw they were there and that they weren't, nobody politically was connecting with them. I would guess that 35% or 80% of the Republican Party.
Yep.
Okay, so we always use 35%, but that's of the nation. It's more like 80% of the Republican Party. That what Donald Trump did for them was he made it okay for them to be themselves.
I agree.
He made it okay for them to be that individual that cheated on your wife. He made it okay for them to be that individual that, spoke very badly of people of different ethnicities. He made it very, very easy and comfortable for individuals, in many cases, to be just flat out mean assholes. And once he made it okay for that, and I could tell you names of people I'm talking about.
We all know.
Right. I mean, draw that image in your head. But once he made it okay for you to live like you already were living, this is who you were beforehand, but he made it okay that, hey, I got a guy that's running for president that's just like me.
Yep. Yeah.
Now granted, he isn't. He went down a gold escalator.
Right. He
makes
nothing
them
like these
think.
people. Nothing
That's
like
who
these
they are.
people.
Right.
No, I know, and you're right. And I still, I don't know. Again, why are they so angry? I wrote a column, a couple of years ago now about Spearfish, South Dakota. A United States senator went out to Spearfish, South Dakota. I think was it Rounds or who was it? Went out there and talked to people in Spearfish, and they just unloaded on him about how their streets aren't safe in Spearfish and what are you going to do about it? And these people are coming across the Mexican border and they're coming to ruin our town. And there's no people coming across the Mexican border going to Spearfish, South Dakota. There's nobody. This Spearfish is a beautiful place. It's gorgeous. It's, again, one of the safest places you could ever be. You're a million miles from Minneapolis. You're a million miles from Denver. You're 2 million miles from New York and Los Angeles. Nobody in those places, with all due respect to Spearfish, knows that Spearfish exists or cares about Spearfish. Yeah. And that there's people there who are worried about migrants coming to rape them and kill them. Well, it doesn't. It's like what?
Well, we just had a man elected in North Dakota in the last election to the state house. Okay, this man ran against no one. The Democrats didn't put a candidate up against him. Right?
Yep.
He gets picked up hammered. Right?
Yes.
And so he goes through the big test. Oh yeah, and it's all body cam, and they see it. Now the person that arrested him was British, had a very British accent. The other guy, the other officer, was black. Right?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
I knew the British.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know the black.
So that's the reason for the other words that he used. And so this guy's hammered, and he knows they're not letting him off. They're going to arrest him. And he starts worrying about his pickup for some reason. I'm just going to drive my pickup home. I know whatever. I mean, how a person's mind works at that time is. But my point is, he looked at those officers, and he looked at the British officer, and that's what made me think of this after you said Spearfish. Yep. And he said, they're invading your country.
Yes.
They're raping your women.
Yep.
That's happening in England?
Yep.
Big time? That isn't even happening here. No. And so you sit there, and he was the MAGA when he ran. He is MAGA through and through. He goes to the church of Donald Trump. And so what makes him so angry? I think that, again, this is an individual that woke up one morning, didn't turn out the way he wanted to, but Donald Trump made it okay.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, fair enough. And by the way, who goes to a Christmas party, gets rip-roaring drunk, and he drove. I mean, people drive drunk. I'm not excusing it, but that happens in life. I mean, it happens. But whose mind turns that way when you're drunk and hammered on Christmas Day or whatever it was, and you're screaming about people getting raped in England by migrants? And who thinks that? Who?
He drank the Kool-Aid,
Oh,
right?
my
I mean,
God.
he drank the Trump Kool-Aid.
I mean, I got to be honest. If I'm going out on Christmas Eve and getting hammered, the last thing I'm thinking about in my life is politics and my grudges against the rest of humanity. I'm thinking about anything but that. My God, it's so
Mike,
odd
that people like him, everybody's thinking, and it's unfair to do this, but everybody's thinking Western North Dakota, Williston, that's who they are. It's happening right here. It's right
yes,
here.
it is.
I
It's
mean,
everywhere.
you look at Koppelman in West Fargo, you look at Casper down in South Fargo. These
Look
people,
at Edwin Hahn and Moorhead.
Yep.
All these people.
They're
they're
right here.
Yep.
And they're part of that caucus that he has that are trying to get rid of any moderate Republican. And, and in his case, he's like, what's his name? Simons from Dickinson.
Luke Simons, yep.
Did you see what he issued?
Oh, yeah,
I mean, it was in your paper, and it made,
insanity.
Right.
It's
and
insanity.
he said, don't give up. They're just trying to run you out. You know where they're trying to run you out? You're an idiot. That's why they're trying to run you out. Yeah.
Does anybody try to, if Doug Burgum announces that he's running for governor,
Yes.
does anybody try to primary him? Because there was a North Dakota poll done that showed Doug Burgum's approval or whatever it was at like 38% in North Dakota.
Yeah.
That's not very good. That tells me that there's, without, I'm no political scientist, although I do have a minor in political science from the school right over across the street over here. He's not going to connect with the MAGAs. They don't like him. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people look at Doug Burgum and what he did for the presidential race and go, what were you doing? And how much money did you spend for that?
Yeah.
And why were you out of state for like 200 straight days? I don't know if he's as popular now as he was before. Does somebody primary him?
Yeah. That's a really good question. They better have money. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, they better have money.
Yep.
In politics,
I mean, he
money is
rolled
the
over
lifeblood.
Wayne Stenhjem with money.
Exactly.
I mean, Wayne Stenhjem was the anointed one to be the next governor in whatever year that was, and Doug Burgum just steamrolled him with money.
And you and I we'd want it to be more, but the answer to media in North Dakota is it's cheap. Compared to a national scale, you can buy a lot of TV and radio and print ads at a way cheaper rate than what you can nationally. And of course, he's got national type money in his own account. So they better have money. I think that he could buy his way onto the ballot again in the fall.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
Rick Becker's not going to outbuy him.
No. Although, going back to how you began the question, though, I think Rick Becker this time would beat him at a convention.
That could be,
Because he didn't beat him last time, but he came way closer than I predicted he would come.
And a convention, of course, is a different set of. It's not the general election voters. It's the hardcore, and now the hardcores are running the districts and running the local Republican parties. I have a friend in Devil's Lake, North Dakota, which is a pretty conservative place. My friend is, I think, pretty conservative, but now he looks like a complete moderate with what the Republican Party is, and he's complaining that people like him are getting run out of the little local districts up around Devil's Lake by who he calls the wackos.
Yeah. Well, you're a columnist that people read, and you've been a radio host that people listen to, and I get calls I get the what you should do calls. You know what you should do? You know what you should do? And when they began like that, I'm like, okay, I should let you use me. But here is the calls I get the most of lately from Republicans and Republican legislators who see their districts going to that MAGA right.
Yep.
And they say, you know what you should do? You should talk about this person here because here's what he's up to. Here's what he's doing. And I look at him and I say, well, two things would need to happen. Number one, you'd need to say it, right?
Yep.
And so I'll do it tomorrow if you say it. And then I look at them and say, okay, as a Democratic legislator who the Democrats are so incredibly irrelevant in North Dakota right now, why would I do what you're asking when what I need is these idiots to hold office? Because in District 23 in Williston now, Democrats will have a candidate next time.
Yes, correct.
Because they're going to look at it and say, hey, we got a chance,
They hate us till they need us, Joel.
Exactly.
I learned that a long time ago in my business. They cannot stand me until I get a call and go, hey, Mike, it's so-and-so. I'm like, really?
You know what you should do?
I got something for you. Real? Do you? Really? That's interesting.
I'll give you a perfect example. The district that I ran in and won had all those workers in Melrose. right?
Yep.
That was a union district.
Yep.
And those union boys voted Democrat at the time, and they were led by Democrats because they needed workers' comp. They needed health insurance, and they needed paid days off, paid leave off.
I know where this is going.
And these individuals, once we got every one of them,
where this is going.
every one of them, it became about gays, guns, and God. And the Democratic Party wasn't seen as any of that. And so because the Democratic Party wasn't seen that way, see ya.
Yeah.
Now, look at it your way. And Colin Peterson,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
He solved farmers' problems.
Yes.
He solved them. He was the farmers' biggest advocate. But you know what? We got it now.
Yep.
We don't need you anymore.
Correct. Ran him
Someday
out
they're going to find out
for
they need
Michelle
Colin Peterson.
Fischbach, who is as bad of a congressperson as you could possibly have,
Or worse.
who represents me and my family here in Moorhead. She is awful. Just awful.
That was one of my gotcha moments on radio, which made absolutely no difference in the election. I just want to clarify that. When she was running against Colin and she came on my show, and that was the only time, because she's so mad that I did that to her, apparently. But I asked her, I said, well, what are you going to do for farmers? And she walked me through whatever the talking points were. And I said, well, what's the price of soybeans? And she goes, what? I said, well, within 50 cents. What's the price of soybeans today? And just long. She goes, well, I don't know. That's relevant. It goes up. No, I said, tell you what, within $1. What's the price? She couldn't answer it.
Yep.
And afterwards, my producer got notification from her handlers that she would not be coming on News and Views anymore.
Well, you know what? She went back to Hallock, Minnesota, and talked about gays, God, and guns, and how the Democrats are going to take away your guns. And she won by 20 points over Colin Peterson.
Exactly.
Well, Joel, you are being served another beverage here at Vic's Bar and Grill in Moorhead.
I'm drinking this, Kid Rock. Bite me.
Wow. It's a Bud Light.
Right.
It's a Bud Light.
Yeah.
Thank you, by the way, to our server. Let's wrap things up. We've been doing this for 45 minutes already. What a blast! What a great
Thanks,
conversation.
Mike. I appreciate you asking.
Let's do it again. We'll try to get, like I said, a regular rotation of what listeners and readers told me was they want smart conversation. And I told them, well, I'll get a different host then. They want smart conversation. They want fun people, and they want topics that matter, but not being screamed at by a bunch of lunatics. We're going to play a game. Somebody just gave us a tic-tac-toe game. That's fantastic.
I got it. I understand it. Good to see you, bud. We are at Vic's.
Yeah. And so, we'll talk with some, the Tony Benders of the world and the Clay Jenkinsons and the Joel Heitkamps, and just try to have some fun, smart conversations about politics and whatever else, beer and sports and fishing. Yeah. Today was politics.
Well,
so thanks
I hope
for coming
you invite
on.
me back. This has been fun, and quite frankly, Tony Bender, Buck says you don't make it 30 minutes. Oh, please make sure you hear Tony. I said that to him. He won't come and guest host anymore.
No,
he won't.
No.
He was good at it.
He's fantastic. He's a great writer.
Always read him.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Joel Heitkamp.
Thanks, Mike.
News and Views Radio Network. You can hear it on your radio, of course, right here in Fargo. It's on KFGO 790. 104.7 on your FM dial. This is the McFeely Mess Podcast, coming to you from Vic's Lounge in Moorhead, Minnesota. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the McFeely Mess Podcast at Inforum.com. For more podcasts and columns, head to Inforum.com and search Mike McFeely